Hi, my name is Cecilia Hernandez, and for the 1107 micro-teaching assignment, I have been issued the topic of social cognition theory. Okay, and my disclaimer to everybody is that before I try to give you a brief overview of social cognition theory, it's this, that social cognition theory talks or discusses topics like learning, cognition, and behavior. And these are topics that science doesn't clearly understand. So there are topics that are complex and intricate with a lot of ongoing research. And so any theory that tries to explain or give an account of these issues is also probably going to be complex. And when I tried to, in the last 3 days, research social cognition theory, I found a variety of accounts that were not clear and that at times conflicted with each other. And I just attribute that to the fact that we're talking about some really abstruse concepts, and 2 days really, for me, just kind of got me jump started on getting a taste of the theory. And hopefully, as I continue to teach, I will hopefully encounter this theory again and get a chance to delve a little bit more deeply. And hopefully you guys will do the same. You'll hear about it now, get a couple of bullet points on the theory that might intrigue you, and maybe down the road do a little bit more research, okay? And I'll go into what my objectives are in just a second. I just want to start with a brief overview of what social cognition theory is first, okay? So my definition that I've got up here is that social cognition theory is a theory of observational learning and vicarious reinforcement, that includes the notion of self-efficacy and self-regulation. Okay, now our objectives for today's little talk, the micro-teaching assignment, is first, I want you to think about how the different parts of this theory fit together, okay? Like I said, the theory is abstruse and perhaps I won't communicate it very effectively, but I do want you guys to just think critically about the information that I'm going to give you and think, okay, does this form a unified theory or are there problems? And if there are problems, are those problems in my explanation or problems that are actual problems of the theory itself? Okay, so we're trying to approach my micro-teaching assignment, or I'm trying to get you guys to approach it as from a critical perspective. Okay, and the second objective is I want you to think in particular about the Bobo doll experiment. Okay, now I haven't explained the Bobo doll experiment, but it's kind of a fascinating part of the theory, and I want you guys to think about how it fits in with the rest of the theory and what are the implications, okay? And that's actually what I have written down here, to evaluate the implications of the Bobo doll experiment, because I think it's actually really relevant to a lot of, to teaching and to a lot of debates about violence in the media that we talk about today. Okay, rather than go through a definition of the theory, we're going to go through the main parts of the theory that every time I came upon a new page of research on the theory, every website that I went to, like these were the components that resurfaced over and over again, okay? And the first one that was always the first to come up when I was researching the theory and different accounts of it, was this reciprocal determination, okay? Now, reciprocal determination says that there's 3 factors, okay? Your environment, your personal factors, which are also termed your cognition, okay, and your behavior. And social cognitive theory, or rather the person behind social cognitive theory, whose name is Bandura, he posits that these 3 factors constantly interact and influence each other. Okay, so an example that I came across that I thought was a really good example to illustrate this was you have a classroom where a teacher is giving a lesson, okay, and that is the environment. A student will respond to information that she's given, she'll process it, and she might have a question about it, okay? So now, as she's processing and trying to, formulate this question, the environment has influenced her behavior, her cognition. So then she'll raise her hand in order to voice the question and get it addressed. And now we have cognition influencing her behavior, namely the behavior to hold up her hand. Okay, when she asks the question, the teacher will hopefully clarify whatever the question is. And in that situation, you have a behavior influencing or affecting the environment. Okay, so according to Bandura, these three factors are always at play and they influence each other. Okay, so we've talked about reciprocal determination as the first kind of idea within social cognition. The second topic that comes up repeatedly when researching the theory is the Bobo doll experiment. Okay, now the Bobo doll experiment is something that I find completely fascinating, and it's actually my favorite part of this research. Okay, in the Bobo doll experiment, this guy Bandura, he takes children and puts them into groups and has them watch a video. Okay, and the video shows a woman displaying really aggressive behavior toward a Bobo doll. A Bobo doll is a blow-up doll that has a weight at the bottom, so no matter how many times you try to knock it over, it'll kind of lean back but always come back to its upright position. Okay, now the children watch this video and then afterward are given an opportunity to play with the doll. And the children showed the exact same, or not the exact same, but that's actually my interpretation. They showed the same behaviors that they saw in the video. Okay, so they basically imitated this woman who was displaying aggressive behavior toward the doll. They showed that same aggressive behavior. What's interesting, what I find interesting about this, what was interesting to Bandura at the time that he performed this experiment in the 1960s was that the woman in the tape, when she was hitting the doll, she didn't receive any sort of reward or punishment, no reinforcement for her behavior. So this kind of made Bandura think, well, maybe not all behavior is driven by rewards and punishments. Okay, here we have a case where a child is just mimicking what they've seen the adult do. Okay, now I want to stop here and think about, so remember my objective was for you guys to think about when we look up or Google social cognition theory, what are the main components of the theory and how do they really form a unified theory? How do they fit together? Okay, so if you guys remember, we have our reciprocal determination, which is environment, behavior, and personal factors or cognition. Now, this experiment, my issue with it is you've got the environment, you've got the video with the woman, and the children are given the tools that are also in the video, okay? And you have the behavior where the children now mimic the model woman's behavior. But where in this puzzle do we have the piece of cognition? Okay, so that's one thing that I didn't quite understand when reading about the Bobo doll experiment over and over again. Okay, so it's something that I want you guys to think about. And also thinking about the Bobo doll experiment in isolation, if it's in fact true that we can learn behaviors from a model and imitate them, then I think a question that might come up is, well, okay, is this the case always? Or does this only occur in developmental stages in a child? Or do we as adults do this? Okay, a second question that you might be thinking about is, well, if adults do this, then where is the agency? Okay, and that's actually, I think, it goes with what I just said was the missing piece of the puzzle, which is cognition. Okay, in this example, in the Bobo doll experiment, we don't have the three parts of Bandura's triangle, and when we don't have cognition, we miss out on something like will or agency, and I think that leads to a lot of problems, because now you have a theory now you have an account of behavior that doesn't allow for choice or for reflection. Okay, so that's where the third component of the theory comes in, and that third component is something called vicarious reinforcement. Okay, now vicarious reinforcement is when we learn not just from observing a model, but we learn from observing a model's behavior as well as the consequences of that behavior. Okay, so we observe the model receive a reward or a punishment for his or her behavior. Okay, and vicarious learning, I think, does coincide with the triangle that I showed you guys at the very beginning, because in vicarious learning, it seems as though the subject is observing a reward or a punishment and now has to kind of think or reflect on that reward or punishment and make a personal decision based on whether they want to experience that same punishment or not. And maybe it's not even that complicated. Maybe it's not even about thinking or evaluating the reward or punishment that I'm seeing. Maybe it's as simple as when I see a behavior modeled, and when I see it being punished or rewarded, that elicits a feeling in me. A feeling of, oh, I want to experience that, or oh, no, I don't want to experience that because it's a punishment. Okay, but either way, in that situation, there seems to be the element of cognition that we were missing in the Bobo doll experiment, and there also seems to be a little bit more agency in that example. Okay. Okay, so we talked about reciprocal determination, which is the little triangle. We talked about the Bobo doll experiment. We talked about vicarious learning. And the last component that recurs over and over again when you research social cognition is self-efficacy and self-regulation. Should have a hyphen. Okay, and I think that's kind of what I was talking about earlier when I talked about the Bobo doll experiment and contrasted that with an example of vicarious learning. And self-efficacy is the belief that you can actually perform the behavior that you see modeled before you. Okay, and self-regulation, I think, is a step beyond that, where now you are acting or you're making a decision based on goals and motivation, okay, to actually act in the manner that you believe you can act in through self-efficacy and that you've just observed through modeling. Okay, so those are the four kind of bullet points behind social cognition theory that I wanted to discuss, so that even if you don't come away from this with an understanding of the theory, you at least come away with an introduction to the main components of the theory, okay? And just to reflect on the information that I've presented. As teachers, I think the idea of behavioral learning of observational learning is really intuitive to us, because we try to model a lot of things for our students based on the assumption that they're going to imitate that behavior and learn it through imitation. Okay, I think it's also intuitive in the sense that when we're growing up and we're learning to do new things, one way to get a handle on how to do new things is by observing other people do those things. Okay, and I think an example that I have is that of riding a bicycle, where someone can show you how to ride a bicycle, then explain the process verbally and have you get on the bike and critique how you do it. Or they can skip out the step where, or try to imagine a situation where you have a child who's learning how to ride a bicycle but has never seen it done. I don't know exactly how that would work out. Maybe I should have performed that experiment just for this micro teaching assignment. I don't know. But I do think that the notion of observational learning is very intuitive. And so that brings me back to the Bobo doll experiment, because if we learn from observation and from mimicking, and that kind of aligns itself with the results of the Bobo doll experiment, then I think we really do need to ask, well, what is the role of agency? And is there one in the developmental stage of a young child or an infant is going through.